based in Salt Lake City. I am an attorney with the law firm of Holland & Hart, and speaking with me today will be my colleague Claire Roston, who is based in Holland & Hart's Boise office. It's a pleasure for us to be talking to you today about the important issues relating to cyber security, specifically ransomware, and legal issues and a practical response consideration that we want to make you all aware of. Just a little bit about myself and my colleague Claire and this practice area that we have been focusing on recently. I am a litigation and trial attorney in the Salt Lake City office, and for the last 15 years I've been representing companies in disputes, any kind of business dispute that can end up in court, that can either go all the way through to a trial or that can be settled before a trial occurs or otherwise dismissed. I've been involved in a variety of different types of business disputes, business divorces, and so forth. In the last couple of years, I have become nudged towards and involved in cases involving data theft, data loss, or data misappropriation, either through stealing of trade secrets or intellectual property, and kind of accidentally fell into the world of cybersecurity through my involvement in those types of cases. And so I lead our firm's cybersecurity practice group. Along with Claire, I have colleagues throughout our other locations. We have 15 locations or 15 offices in about 7 states. About 6 months ago, we hired a technical expert, a gentleman by the name of Matt Sorensen, who's unable to join us today, but he is a certified healthcare and information security practitioner, and also very well versed in HIPAA compliance, and he just so happens to be an attorney as well, so he's been a great pickup for us. Cybersecurity is something that affects every industry. Everywhere where there is a computer, where there are phones, any kind of connected device relating to the operation of a business, you have cybersecurity issues. And that's what has given rise to this practice area. It's just we are a firm that provides services to all corporations, and so the demand has just required it. Now, healthcare is a field and industry that has been massively impacted by the rise in cybersecurity incidents. And we're going to be talking about a specific type of incident today. And before I start, I just want to point out that the purpose of our presentation is just to educate and provide general information. We're not providing legal advice. In our materials that we have circulated, we are including in that contact information. Also, materials we think you will find relevant because they have been provided by the Department of Human Health and Services, specifically the Office of Civil Rights. And why that is pertinent will be explained. We have about 20 to 25 slides we're going to work our way through. Claire and I are going to take turns at doing so. My colleague, Claire, is a transactional attorney. She's more of a builder, someone who helps businesses and companies set in place the appropriate structures and deals and transactions they need to operate. I am kind of involved on the back end when some of those things don't work out as well. But we're happy to present to you today, and if you have any questions, feel free to send us emails through the contact information provided in our materials. And I'll pass the time over to Claire to introduce our specific topic today.
Good afternoon, everyone. And as a transactional attorney, it's always my goal to never have any of the people I work with have to call Romaine, but if they do, they're in very good hands. So our cybersecurity practice spans all types of practices in terms of litigation transactional, and I think that's one of our best strengths. So moving on to the topic at hand, what is ransomware? It is an age-old crime with an electronic twist. No longer are we kidnapping people and holding them ransom for money. It's now turned to your valuable data. Ransomware is malware, and specifically software intended to cause damage to your hardware that is delivered through emails with malicious attachments or links to infected web pages. And that's the primary source of ransomware. You also can infect your computer or mobile device if you log on to an infected website, oftentimes through malicious advertisements on trusted websites that you've visited before. And what happens is your data is held hostage until you pay the ransom to receive the decryption key. And we'll move to the next slide so you can see an example of what might pop up on your computer if it becomes infected. And typically, they're asking for payment through Bitcoin. This allows them to avoid identification or tracing back to the hacker or adversary. And some victims have paid and still been denied the decryption key. So you kind of have to have a hope and a prayer there that they are going to follow through. And some ransomware also destroys or will transfer your data. And that's what, it's the possibility of transferring your data or publicly disclosing it that leads us to the topic at hand today of why OCR has come out and said that breach notification is required, or at least presumptively required, when there's a ransomware attack, and we will get to that later. But the key point of ransomware is that they don't have to steal the data. They can just make it inaccessible to you while you are debating whether or not to pay or find another way to deal with the downtime. And recovery of encrypted data without obtaining the decryption key is unlikely due to cyber criminals' well-implemented strong encryption, but there are some types of ransomware that there are ways to decrypt on your own. So there's a wide range of options out there for you. And some attackers of late have been making the data public if you don't pay by a certain time. And here is one more example. This is CryptoLocker is a common form of ransomware. And this is a message you could receive if your computer or device is infected.
One of the interesting things about cybersecurity incidents or cyber attacks or hacking attacks is they are related to the stealing of data, and then in turn there is all this data that's generated by what's been stolen. For example, the media. It's commonly held belief now that the general public are suffering from cybersecurity fatigue, which is no one is no longer shocked to hear about in the news that some corporation has been attacked. The most recent incident I can remember was just yesterday, the news article about former General Colin Powell's emails getting attacked. And there have been disclosures about comments he made about people. Hacking incidents have become so common, they're almost something we just expect to hear about on a daily basis. Just within the last 6 weeks, there was a hospital, a physician group in Arizona that was attacked. a group of 200 anesthesiologists, and they had to notify 880,000 patients about that incident. Banner Health also had to notify about 3.7 million people. And it even trickles down in the healthcare industry to a company like Newkirk Products. They are based in New York, and all they do is issue cards for the insurance they have. They were hacked, and they had to notify 3.3 million patients that the information they had acquired just to generate and manufacture the cards had been hacked. And so there are all these events happening in the news, and ransomware is one of them that we don't hear about as much. We are aware of a law firm that was afflicted by a ransomware incident, and that didn't go public at all because they didn't want their clients to know, and they just paid off what the ransom hackers were seeking. There is still, however, in the healthcare field, a lot of buzz around ransomware, mostly this year because it has increased significantly. And the healthcare sector is a sector that has so much personally identifiable information that is valuable or has a value to hackers that it is thought that ransomware is going to be something that's more commonly seen. It is unclear what the hackers are doing with all this personal health information, other than it is pretty obvious they are building profiles or using the information to do such things as, of course, withdraw money from accounts, use credit cards fraudulently, or sometimes even apply for federal or state benefits such as Medicare. Although the organizations, healthcare only account for a small percentage of victims, that's going to grow because the information healthcare companies have is usually not just one type of information, but a multiple of types of information. And it's not just financial, but it's also personal and sensitive information. And so there's a real value there for hackers and then hackers who buy that information. You'll see a slide from a security magazine stating that ransomware is up 3,000%. It's an astronomical rise in these types of incidents, and it is estimated that about 20 data loss incidents are occurring daily in the form of a ransomware attack. 88% of ransomware attacks in healthcare industries hit hospitals. So on one hand, healthcare is still just a small percentage of these attacks, but most of them are happening to hospitals. A security engineering research team has compiled these statistics, and it is anticipated throughout the remainder of this year that they will continue to grow at the same rate. One of the incidents that has been publicized involved the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital that was hit with ransomware. The hackers demanded $3.7 million in Bitcoin, a form of online currency. As it played out, the hackers didn't get anywhere near that amount, but still the hospital and medical center paid $17,000 to have its files and systems restored. That's a significant departure, of course, from $3.7 million, but unfortunately they weren't able to get onto their systems for 5 days. So depending on the size of the hospital or your facility, that 5 days can be in the millions of dollars range. During that 5 days that the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital was without access to its systems, they were forced to revert to using pen and paper since they couldn't access their systems. So it's very, very inconvenient. One of the things that's almost humorous among hackers is some of them actually have a conscience about healthcare or health information, and that is a kind of area in which they do not think hackers should be trying to exploit. In the Russian underground in particular, there's an ethical code of conduct that places that information off limits, even in countries usually targeted by Russian-speaking hackers. This is interesting and is perhaps analogous to the general population in a prison. Certain types of prisoners will need to be isolated from the other types of prisoners for their own well-being and safety, because the type of crimes they commit are seen as heinous even by the general population, the other types of prisoners. So how this translates to the statistics, the growing statistics, it is unclear, but there are still way too many occurrences of ransomware in healthcare.
Great, thanks, Romain. And just as a follow-on, I have read that there's suspicion that hackers are saving the personal data of children, and the intent is that that information may be used later when they turn 18 to create identity profiles, or basically steal their identities to get tax returns, apply for benefits, all the types, credit cards, all the types of things that people do when they engage in identity theft. So the implications are far-reaching and could happen down the road, 10 or 15 years from now. So next question is, why is healthcare a target? And primarily it's for two reasons. First of all, this is lucrative. The hackers can get money through ransom payments, and in particular, healthcare organizations are motivated to pay up because people's lives are at stake when they don't have access to their systems to be able to provide patient care. So that's one reason why these renegade hackers, we think, are going after the healthcare organizations. Also, Intel Security recently identified about $100,000 in payments from hospital victims of a particularly high-risk ransomware called SamSam in the first quarter of this year alone. So that's only one type of ransomware that's being used, and that's already generated about $100,000 in Bitcoin payments by hospital victims. But that ransomware has a higher rate of payment than others, and still most victims ransomware do not pay because they have other means to back up their systems, and we'll get into that later. So the FTC, or the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, recent study this summer found that ransom goes up the longer you wait to pay. So if you're pretty confident you need to make the payment because you don't have any backups in place, if you want to save a little money, do it early instead of waiting a few days. The other reason why this is so lucrative is that they can turn around and sell the data on the black market. The FBI has reported that even partial electronic health records can fetch about $50 each. So when you're talking in the hundreds of thousands or millions, you can make a lot of money. And this information, the Social Security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, next of kin, they can be used for identity theft, applying for loans, those types of things. And this data, like I was mentioning, it's not perishable. I mean, that Social Security is linked to a child, and then they become an adult, and that can be used later. In comparison, when your credit card gets hacked, it can quickly be shut down, and then you can be issued a new card. And then the last reason that healthcare is a target is because healthcare uses a lot of legacy systems and medical devices that are not updated frequently or patched. And also there are so many different systems in place and devices that there's a lot of points of entry. So it's a pretty easy target for the hackers as well. Okay, and unfortunately, the costs are significant if you are a ransomware victim. The direct costs include if you have to make the payment, the ransom payment, also lost revenue during your downtime. I mean, obviously those 5 days of downtime at Presbyterian were terribly expensive. The system recovery costs, which may include having to hire third-party vendors to help with that. You have the incident response work, which is likely going to include breach notification and then whatever goes along with mitigating the breaches, such as paying for credit monitoring services for all the affected individuals. And then the post-incident work that will involve like audit services, taking a look back at what went wrong and trying to fix those vulnerabilities in your procedures so that it doesn't happen again. And one question has come through on the Q&A that asks, do they ever disclose how the hacked or ransomware happened? And a lot of information about what ransomware samples or files are used are collected by the different software services that create like anti-spam and various solution technology tools. So there's ways to get aggregated information about what ransomware types or what they call in the industry samples are being used. Also, during the notification process, there's typically a description of what happened, but that tends not to provide a lot of details. So you're better off, if you're trying to kind of understand how this ransomware happens, where the infiltration happens, is to look at some more of the aggregated descriptions by the software companies that track it. And then talking about the indirect costs, you do have lost productivity. You get, if people have to go elsewhere for services, if they're going to do follow-on services, they'll likely continue with the other provider, not you. And then the reputational risk is pretty significant, and you could lose patients permanently because of it. Great. So the government has been focusing on this in the last, I'd say, most recently a couple months, year, as you've seen from some of the materials that have been sent out in the healthcare industry. The FBI has been publishing resources about ransomware and how to deal with it. You can go to their website and find many fact sheets that go into great detail about ransomware and what you can do from a technical and social standpoint to prevent it or respond to it. The Federal Trade Commission held its first seminar of its 3-part series on technology issues on September 7th of this year, so just last week, and the focus was ransomware. And during that 3-hour event that I listened in on, the chair of the FTC announced that the FTC will soon offer guidance on how businesses can protect themselves against ransomware, and also that the FTC is primarily going to focus on protecting U.S. consumers through enforcement. So they're not looking to help you. They're going to be going after you if you've done something wrong. And so the Federal Trade Commission gets their jurisdiction through the FTC Act that prohibits unfair and deceptive acts affecting commerce and they deem inadequate security measures to be unfair, and they deem misrepresentations about your privacy in your privacy policy or what you're doing to protect people's privacies as deceptive. And there is case law supporting that they have authority to regulate cybersecurity efforts.
One of the double whammies, if you will, of getting attacked by hackers is not only are you a victim directly as a result of the hacking incidents, but then on the back end, you can be victimized by customers, patients who are unhappy that their personal information has been disclosed. They may bring a lawsuit, and in that lawsuit allege that now my identity has been compromised, in addition to the possibility of someone representing themselves as me in order to get benefits. Some will allege that their personal information has been devalued, and they will allege these types of things in lawsuits, claiming that the healthcare facility, the retailer, whoever had the information that was stolen was negligent. And so that's the worst of all things to happen, is to be victimized and then sued as a result. And if you're not sued by individuals, then in some instances the banks will sue the victims or the companies that have been hacked by saying, look, I had to issue new credit cards to your customers who were victims of the incident that happened to your systems. Or they will say, I had to employ a bunch of additional staff in the call center to respond. And so it can create so many problems. And then, as Claire has pointed out, you have to deal with the regulators. And the FTC is just one regulator that they're seen as the most aggressive regulator going after companies who get hacked now, but there are also the CFPB, or the Consumer Fraud and Protection Bureau, is another one, and the Securities and Exchange Commission is another one. And then, of course, every state has a breach notification statute. That is a statute that requires companies who have personal information, when that information has been compromised through a breach, a cyber attack, must then notify those people that their information could have been compromised or accessed from their system. And each state has one of those statutes, and most of them are the same, but some of them have different requirements. Some of them are stricter, some of them are more specific, but all of them are enforced by attorney generals. So they are another regulator that could go after, or has been going after, companies who have been hacked. And then, of course, we've talked about OCR and that division of the Health and Human Services Department. Just in the last few months, they have issued fines and penalties to 3 different healthcare companies, what's been referred to as the HIPAA hat trick. Just in the last few months, Advocate Healthware was fined $5.5 million. Oregon Health and Science University agreed to pay $2.7 million, and then the University of Mississippi Medical Center agreed to pay $2.7 million as well, all for incidents that occurred to their systems, which exposed, in each case, thousands, in some cases, millions of patients' health information. As to ransomware, the Office of Civil Rights has issued some good guidance. In addition to the FTC, and it's more specific to the industry, the Health and Human Services letter we have attached to these materials dated June 20th gives some guidance and on the threat of ransomware, as does the letter from OCR dated July 11. Both of these letters are included and include references to risk analyses. OCR has taken the opportunity to use ransomware as an example of where healthcare facilities should have implemented a risk analysis assessment process. They should know where all the sensitive information is located. They should know what its exposure is, how it is subject to risk, and then they should be implementing controls that lessen that risk, and then monitoring and evaluating those controls over time. Where OCR has issued big fines, it's been in instances where a hacking incident happened and it wasn't so much the damage that resulted from those incidents that dictated how much healthcare facilities were being fined, but it was what they had in place to prevent the incidents in the first place or to enable them to have a better response. And in the HIPAA hat trick instances I talked about, they had very little to nothing in place to either detect an incident was happening or to be able to adequately respond. And establishing an incident response plan and program is a discussion for another day, but also something we're happy to provide materials for if you'd like to reach out and contact us afterwards.
So turning specifically to the OCR guidance on ransomware, what they did was they came out and said that any ransomware attack is presumptively a security incident, and therefore you need to initiate all of your security incident response and reporting procedures per the HIPAA breach notification or security rule and the breach notification rules for a ransomware attack. So even though ransomware does not necessarily transfer your data or disclose it to unauthorized individuals, it could just be locking it down, the presumption is that that happened unless proven or documented otherwise. So that's the clear message that the OCR guidance gives. And so once you've had a ransomware attack, you need to begin to implement your procedures in compliance with the HIPAA breach notification and security rules. And what these are is, number one, you analyze the scope, origin, status, and methodology of the ransomware. And that basically is just to gather enough information about what happened. And then you need to isolate and preserve. So isolate the infected computers from the network to avoid propagation on the network to other file servers. You do not want to clean or re-image these infected computers. You want to preserve them as they are. It's possible that your other recovery approaches, such as using a backup, will not work. Some ransomware is infecting backup copies as well. And so if that happens, these infected computers may be your last option for recovering data. And then obviously preserving the computers provides evidence in the case that you need to gather more information. The next step is to recover, and that is where you want to restore the data that's been lost and return to normal operations. I imagine that's easier said than done, but you hope that you have a very strong IT department that can do that swiftly. Ideally, you have a backup drive that was physically stored offline and it didn't get infected by the ransomware, and then you can return to normal operations quickly. And ransomware, as I've mentioned, can encrypt any data on any drive, including those backup drives. So that's the reason why people advocate that you have a backup drive that is physically stored offline, it's isolated, it's on another location, sometimes referred to as air gapping, that Romain will talk about a little bit more later. And the FBI does not recommend paying the ransom, but acknowledges that businesses will need to consider all options when faced with the inability to function, and that may be their best option. And then the last step is to report or notify those people that need to be notified under the applicable federal and state legislation. With respect to HIPAA, the covered entities will need to notify the affected individuals, the Secretary of the HHS, and then also the media if the breach affects more than 500 people. If you're a business associate, your notification obligation is to the covered entity. And then also, some state laws say that they do not apply if you're in compliance with the federal laws. So like with HIPAA, other state laws don't provide that exception. So there can be, they may have additional requirements that you need to comply with, such as notifying that state's AG or a local law enforcement.
Many of you are specialists in what you do, whether it be in IT, HR, actually administering treatments and so forth. And in the same way, Claire and I are specialists in our particular areas, but in addressing cybersecurity and ransomware attacks, for example, takes a multidisciplinary approach. As many of you are specialists, many of you will work in teams with other specialists in different areas in order to become the best problem solvers. The OCR has issued guidance on responding to ransomware, and then there are some exceptions to that when it is not required. If you can document that there is a low probability of compromise of data that was encrypted, there is no reporting obligation. And this will often take multiple or a variety of people having to collaborate to do this. And first of all, there needs to be an understanding of what HIPAA defines as a breach. A breach, according to HIPAA, is the acquisition, access, use, or disclosure of PHI in a manner not permitted under the HIPAA privacy rule, and which compromises the security or privacy of the PHI. So according to OCR's recent guidance, a breach occurs when ePHI is encrypted by ransomware because unauthorized individuals have taken possession and control of data, and then it is presumed that the ePHI has been compromised unless proven otherwise by a risk assessment. There are some resources at the end of our materials that can direct you to a guide for responding to HIPAA breaches. But as far as encrypting or encrypted PHI goes, in accordance with HHS guidance, just encrypting ePHI is not enough. Your encryption methodologies must have actually rendered the ePHI unreadable, unusable, and indecipherable to cyber criminals. For example, full disk encryption satisfies this standard when the infected computer is turned off but does not limit access to cyber criminals who can gain the same access levels granted to an authenticated user. who may have opened an attachment or performed another action. OCR states that at a minimum, the risk assessment must consider factors listed in a certain code, 45 CFR 164, and that is the nature and extent of PHI involved, the unauthorized person to whom the disclosure was made, or who used the PHI, or whether the PHI was actually acquired or viewed, and mitigation of the risk to the PHI. So in the context of ransomware, this is a fact-intensive analysis that should focus on correctly identifying the malware involved, the steps undertaken by the malware, communications with the cybercriminals command and control servers, and other systems. This can help determine, among other things, what types of data were searched for, whether the original data was encrypted, whether there were attempts to transfer the data, and whether hidden malicious software was implanted to provide future access. OCR doesn't offer any bright line examples of what would constitute a low risk of compromise. It just encourages victims of those suffering or going through a ransom attack to consider additional factors about the risk and unavailability of ePHI and the impact it will have on that information. This is dense, very specific type of knowledge or specific guidance that the OCR is given that will require collaboration. Again, this is a multidisciplinary problem, requires collaboration with IT departments, your information security officers, HR people, and then when necessary, based on the size of your facility and company, outside help in the form of IT support and security services and also forensic investigation capabilities. There is also guidance or things that can be done pre-attack, things that will make you more secure but not fully secure. We know human error is one of the main causes of cyber incidents, and that is the same with ransomware, especially when a lot of it is just coming through emails or malware attached to seemingly innocuous emails. I'm going to let Claire take over as to what helps or what things can keep a system as best as possible from being subjected to ransomware.
Great, thanks, Romain. Romain has to make a 2 o'clock flight, so he is going to step away, and I'm going to finish things.
Thanks, Claire.
So in preparation, what you can do before attack happens, and as some security experts have said, it's not a question about if but when, is you can do a lot of things on the technical and social side to help prevent the attack. So on the technical side, you can, the first thing to do is to keep your system patches up to date to the extent possible. So with the types of programs like your operating systems, Java, Adobe, Flash, applications that are used on devices for like your doctors, mobile devices, those types of things, is keeping them patched and up to date. So many of the vulnerabilities that are commonly abused by ransomware, they will utilize vulnerabilities in these systems to infect. So that can be very helpful. The problem that the healthcare industry faces, and particularly hospital systems, is that there are a lot of legacy systems and medical devices that cannot be patched. And so in those instances, there's other techniques. You can application whitelist to lock down systems and prevent unapproved programs from getting through. Application whitelisting is basically identifying things that are not permitted to get loaded. So you can identify things that you don't want to let enter. You can also use a firewall or intrusion prevention system to segment these systems and devices from other parts of the network. You can disable unnecessary services or ports on these systems to reduce exposure to possible entry points of infection. So there are things you can do on the technical side with patching or alternatives. Use anti-spam. And as we had discussed, as I had mentioned, that if you can do network segmentation, identify your sensitive and critical systems and devices that are required for patient care, and then segment those from other parts of your network. Following the principle of least privilege is also recommended. Basically, what that is that if someone doesn't need access, don't give it to them. Reduce everyone's privilege to files unless they need it. So you don't want to have all of your EHR available to every single person on the system. And as I had talked about before, air gapping backups by physically locating the backup system, storage, and tapes to a secure offsite location from the systems in the production network. And then Romain mentioned that many cyber attacks, and particularly ransomware attacks, because they're done through phishing emails, can be prevented through user awareness education. And the thing to focus on with ransomware when you're educating your employees is do not open emails or attachments from unverified or unknown senders. One study said that about 90% of all cyber breaches can be stopped with good cyber hygiene. So there's a lot that can be done on the prevention side. But knowing that there is a likelihood that at some time in the future this is going to get through, I think they say an average of 9 out of 10 phishing emails will not go through, but the 10th one will, that you have a plan in place. So getting that cyber incident response plan. And as Romain was discussing, the first step is understanding what is your critical data, what is it that you want to protect, and are there vulnerabilities to that data, and can it be infiltrated? And so that involves conducting penetration testing to figure out how you can protect that data. Their plan should also cover who's responsible. In the case of a cyber incident, their contact info, what is the mission critical systems and data that you need to prioritize in getting back online, procedures for preserving data related to the intrusion, notification procedures for applicable law, and also who and whether you want to contact law enforcement. The FBI strongly encourages people to contact them. They're trying to gather as much information about the ransomware samples and where they're coming from so that they can take enforcement actions, and in some cases they have been able to. They were able to identify a website of a mom and pop store that was being used for disseminating ransomware, and it was unknown to the owners of this store that their website was being used. And once they were contacted, they were able to shut down the website and have a new website made available, and that was no longer then in use. So the FDA would like to gather information from you. It's also possible that they will use that to enforcement and go after the perpetrators, but more likely than not, they're just going to be utilizing it to try to deal with larger investigations. And then the last part of having your plan in place is you want to test it by performing business continuity and disaster recovery drills to see if you really can get back up online as quickly as you would like to. So during an attack, the steps that are outlined in the FBI's cyber unit handout that we have provided, and those should be in the emails that you receive. They'll also be available online, but this is the best practices for victim response and reporting of cyber incidents. They focus on 4 steps that are very similar to the steps that are recommended by the OCR guidance for the HIPAA rules. And so I won't go into repeat myself, but basically assess the situation, what has happened, and then in addition to figuring out what's happened, what malware has been used, also figuring out how is your system currently being used, who's logged on, what connections do you have to the infected systems, where are your open ports, and then also focus on preservation. So make sure that you're, do not reimage your infected computers. Preserve them so that if they need to be used either for forensic purposes or for recovery purposes, that's available. And then step 2 is minimizing your damage. You want to stop the attack. Ransomware attackers have been known to come back a second time, so you do want to be able to identify what's happened, stop it, and then be vigilant for the next one. Then ideally you're able to restore your network using a backup that you have that has not been compromised. But if you're unable to do that, the next question will be, do you want to pay the ransom? And then you hope that they will be providing you the decryption key and you can get back up and running. Then the third step is to record and collect. You want to image your infected computers, preserve relevant existing logs, keep an ongoing written record of response action to document what you're doing, and also be vigilant and look and record information about any continuing or later attacks. And the last step is the notification or reporting step, and the different groups you want to think about in notifying that is the people within your organization, the people you need to per the HIPAA breach notification rules, which we discussed previously, law enforcement. I mean, as I mentioned, the FBI encourages you to notify them. Not all victims do, so it's your call what approach you want to take there, but they have been successful in shutting down some adversaries with information that victims are providing. And then also looking to the state breach notification laws and determining whether or not you need to notify any state agencies. So before we move just to the end with additional resources, another question had come in about saying that when you communicate with your medical equipment vendor and have them change the default password and make it unique to your site. So I understand that, not a question, but a recommendation to have your medical equipment vendor change the default password and make it unique to your site. So that's a good tip for dealing with some of these medical devices that may not be as easy to patch. And just coming to an end of our hour, we have sent out some handouts in the emails, and those will be made available online as well. We also want to point you guys to some resources that can be helpful as you deal with these types of incidents or you prepare for them. Our cybersecurity practice posts articles regularly online. One of these recently was about the ransomware attacks. And you can see by going to our website some of the different articles that may be of interest to you. And we also would like to point you to the nomoreransom.org website. This has recently come online. It's an initiative by the National High-Tech Crime Unit of the Netherlands Police. Europol's European Cybercrime Center, and 2 cybersecurity companies, including Intel Security, and their goal is to help victims of ransomware retrieve their encrypted data without having to pay the criminals. So this website has a lot of good resources. And then for post-breach response, we have a slide deck from a presentation that Matt Sorensen gave that provides a lot of helpful information. Kim Stinger's checklist for responding to HIPAA breaches. I'm sure many of you have already looked at this. It's also available online. And then yesterday, well, or maybe a couple days ago, a lot of the news articles came out on Intel Security's threat report that is done by its McAfee Labs division. Its September 2016 report focused on 3 key topics, and one of them was ransomware in the healthcare industry. So a lot of information that you've heard during this hour came from data points in that report. And we appreciate you attending this webinar and hope that some of our future webinars will be helpful to you. We will be presenting on medical records, marketing traps for providers, antitrust issues, and handling problem patients in the months to come. So here's our schedule, and we hope that you can attend in the future. And if you have any follow-on questions or would like to discuss anything related to HIPAA, to the OCR guidance, cybersecurity, please do not hesitate to contact me or Romaine, and we can always pull in other experts we have to discuss your questions. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.